people often ask me, and you alluded to this earlier, how does the Charter of Rights impact on individual lives? Well, I don't think it impacts directly on many lives, but I do believe that it has strengthened our culture when it comes for the respect of individual rights. And to me, that is the most important the sequel to the Charter. I mean, there are many cases that are decided on sort of narrow points. The majority of them happen to be criminal cases. The same-sex marriage case, which I was pleased to have the opportunity of presiding over, was, I think, a classic example of the value of the Charter, because it demonstrated that the Charter, in most respects, is there to protect minorities. And a lot of people lose sight of that fact, that the Charter is basically again, I repeat myself, protect the rights of minorities against the majoritarian, because the majoritarian view is not necessarily the right view or the fair view, and it can override the rights of individuals, and I think that's where it's been most important. But quite apart from the individual cases, like the same-sex marriage case, I think it really has strengthened our culture of respect again for the rights of minorities, and I think it's brought a balance to Canadian life and Canadian culture. I mean, for example, whatever problems we have in Canada, I think we're lucky to have avoided the growing extremism that really does seem to represent the political world in the U.S. I mean, it's become there be so many extreme views that are that have grown in the U.S. I mean, the government has almost become dysfunctional, and I think the Charter, notwithstanding the fact that the Americans have a Bill of Rights, that I think, in my own view, maybe it's too early to tell even 30 years later, but in my own view, I think it has prevented a lot of the extremism that we have witnessed in the U.S. and elsewhere in the world. Our dealing with the Aboriginal communities in Canada has been one of the very sad chapters in Canadian history. We didn't know just how a Charter of Rights might help that relationship, and because the idea of Aboriginal rights was still in many respects in the conceptual stage, and that's why we didn't attempt to define Aboriginal rights in the Charter, because you could have never got an agreement. What we tried to do was just maintain the status quo. So whatever Aboriginal rights were found to exist, that they wouldn't be affected by the Charter. But I certainly learned that the newer Canadians were astonished when they had become proud Canadians, and then only to learn that the Canadian Constitution was still an act of the British Parliament. In my view, this was nothing less than a national embarrassment. Now, during all these negotiations and during the arguments in the Supreme Court of Canada, I mean, people, it wasn't a question of sort of trying to fiddle with individual clauses of the Charter of Rights, because that would have never worked. I mean, the process just wasn't built that way. I mean, basically, either you accepted it or in its form, or you didn't. Now, I think Canadians had a significant impact, or some Canadians, on the Charter, because my recollection is that the Justice Committee of Parliament held a number of hearings in which various Canadians, groups and interests attended, and I think that process probably strengthened the Charter. And I know the Charter that was agreed upon in 1981 was a much stronger Charter than what appeared to have been agreed upon in 1971. It was much more substantial. I mean, for example, in 1971, it talked about Canadians being the Canadians be protected from, say, unlawful arrest and detention, is but one example. And between 1971 and 1981, that expression became unreasonable arrest and detention. And as you know, I mean, the difference was very substantial, because the unlawful would mean, of course, contrary to an existing law, but unreasonable. I mean, basically, it became the length of the Lord Chancellor's foot, that it would be up to the judges to determine what was unreasonable. So, and I think that strengthened the Charter a lot.